Welcome to the journey of transformation. We are in the fifth stage of our journey, studying the principles, the parables, and the conversations of Jesus that teach us how to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. For we know that, as John says in 1 John chapter 4, verse 16, that God is love, and those who live in love live in God, and God lives in them. That's our goal, to live in Him, and He lives in us. And if you're just recently joined us on our journey, we invite you to go back to the beginning of the series, video number 1.1. And you can find it on YouTube. And there you can begin the series at the very start. If you have trouble finding that first video, then send us a message and we'll send you a link to that video. Today we're in the fifth stage, so we're on video 5.17, the 17th study about loving our neighbors as we love ourselves. And this study will be called Make Sure Your Light is Not Darkness. We're going to be reading from Luke chapter 11, verses 34 to 36, a very important principle that Jesus taught. He says there, Luke 11, verse 34, "Your eye is the lamp of your body. When your eyes are healthy, your whole body also is full of light. But when they are unhealthy, your body is also full of darkness. See to it, then, that the light within you is not darkness. Therefore, if your whole body is full of light, and no part of it dark, it will be just as full of light as when a lamp shines its light on you." We do not believe that it could be possible for a young person to spend time playing violent video games without it affecting how his or her brain is wired emotionally. It's just the way our brains function. On some level, the carefully choreographed violence is providing the child with pleasure, excitement, and even an adrenaline rush. There can be no doubt that playing these video games will darken and damage, at least to some degree, his understanding about how to love his neighbor. Jesus taught a valuable principle that would help his disciples decide what to look at and think about in order to maintain their emotional and spiritual health. Using a metaphor of a lamp providing light, he compared our eyes to lamps. If our eyes are functioning properly, they will provide sufficient light that will make our bodies full of light. In a very literal sense, our eyes do provide light to our bodies. The pupil of the eye is an opening that allows light to enter the eye and strike the retina, which has nerve connections to the brain. The iris of the eye, reflecting the colors that identify our eyes, is really a muscle. The muscle contracts and widens to determine how much light passes through the pupil. The lens covers the pupil and focuses the light to interpret more distinctly the wavelengths of light that strike the eyes. The cornea covers and protects the eyes. So, when light strikes the retina through the opening of the pupil, the brain is able to interpret the light in terms of information and process it as knowledge. It is an amazingly intricate and complex design that can lead to our salvation or our destruction. The choice is ours. Light is knowledge. Ultimately, our eyes provide far more knowledge than any of our other senses. How we interact with the world begins with light entering our eyes. How we think, how we behave, how we speak, what we say, all depend on the light entering our eyes. Jesus reasons with us that if our eyes are healthy, focused on obtaining knowledge that leads to physical, emotional, and spiritual health, our whole bodies, our entire lives will be full of light, the light of true understanding. We choose what we look at. Our choices are based on previous knowledge and understanding that enables us to make these choices. For instance, we choose to look at images that we know will give us pleasure. And we look away from things that we know or that we have learned that make us afraid. Furthermore, it is like a two-way street between our desires and what we look at. Our desires to feel pleasure and avoid pain cause us to choose to look at certain images and avoid others. Then the experience of viewing certain images creates and reinforces those desires. Therefore, if we read some information and view images that teach us the pleasure of creating, serving, protecting, achieving healthy goals, and valuing things of genuine lasting worth, then our eyes are providing information that will make our entire bodies, all of our actions and reactions, full of light and healthy. Jesus also explains what happens when our eyes are unhealthy. How could they become unhealthy? Unhealthy eyes allow light to come in, but that light is really darkness in the sense of ignorance, deception, and falsehood. Imagine viewing commercials on television of people drinking alcohol and having an enjoyable time surrounded and accepted by beautiful people. After viewing many similar examples of people experiencing the same positive emotions while drinking alcohol, our brains begin to associate alcohol with these sorts of pleasure. These images attract our attention, and we begin to imagine ourselves in similar circumstances. Now the images we have allowed our eyes to view have produced desires, but these desires are based on images that are deceptive and false. It is knowledge that is untrue, not reflecting reality. If we drink alcohol, we will not automatically live like the people pictured in these images in the commercials. But now our eyes are open wide with interest and satisfaction when we view these images. If we continue to allow light that is really darkness of deception and ignorance to enter our minds, our whole bodies, our entire lives will become unhealthy and darkness. We will foolishly follow what we see by practicing the behavior that darkness encourages. So Jesus warns us to make sure that the light within us is not darkness. How do we do this? We must first distinguish between seeing and perceiving. We define seeing as the process of sensing images with our eyes, allowing light to enter them, registering and recording the light waves. Perception is what our brains do with the light waves, whether our brains interpret the images as pleasurable or reasons to be afraid. This interpretation, as we have seen, depends on previous knowledge and understanding that comes from what we have experienced. Commercials about alcohol display false information that forms false perceptions about the benefits of consuming alcohol. Perceptions, therefore, can be true interpretations of what we see or false, deceptive interpretations. We must constantly ask ourselves whether the perceptions we have are accurate. Jesus' teachings on loving our neighbors, for instance, can help us evaluate our perceptions to see if they are true or false. Jesus teaches that loving our neighbors includes pursuing peace with them, treating them with gentleness and kindness, as well as refusing to pay back evil for evil. For this reason, entertainment like video games that propose to entertain us with violence creates false perceptions, darkness pretending to be light while denying love for our neighbors. Once we learn how to distinguish what we see from the perceptions that we form about what we see, we can make better choices about what to view. We decide to stop playing video games that entertain us with violence and begin to ignore commercials about alcohol. Consider how many images daily flood through our eyes to be interpreted by our brains. How careful we must be in deciding what to look at and how to perceive what we see. Our total health depends on it. Now, how does this principle of protecting the light within us help us love our neighbors? The assumptions and conclusions we form upon seeing our neighbors will depend on whether there is darkness or light within us. Will we laugh or show compassion when we see them suffering? Will we be envious or happy when we see their success? Will we be cynical or hopeful when we view their efforts to change their lives? Will we feel resentful and vengeful, or merciful and forgiving when they offend us? Will we be severe or gentle when we see our neighbor's weaknesses? Will we think of only our own needs or sacrifice what we have to help our neighbors when we see they have serious needs? Loving our neighbors depends on how we choose to perceive our neighbors. How we choose to perceive them depends on whether we have permitted darkness or light to fill us. Is the light that enters our eyes true light that gives us pure understanding and forms truthful perceptions? Or is what we believe to be light really darkness? And Jesus told his disciples, if your whole body is full of light and no part of it dark, it will be just as full of light as when a lamp shines its light on you. Now let's think of some qualities of love that are needed to practice this principle. One of them is self-control. Self-control is to have the inner emotional and spiritual strength necessary to control our minds and actions. Why does this principle require self-control? Inner strength from knowing and valuing the teachings of Jesus about love enables us to make healthy choices about the light that we allow to enter our eyes. There's also gentleness. Gentleness is to treat others with tenderness instead of severity, not wanting to cause them harm. How does gentleness help in the practice of this principle? Gentleness forms a lens through which we ought to view our neighbors when we form perceptions of their behavior and needs. Gentleness is one of the lenses we look through, as well as compassion. Compassion is to feel the suffering of another person deeply enough to want to relieve their suffering. How does compassion help in the practice of this principle about light? Compassion also forms part of our lens to view our neighbors in order to appreciate their suffering and want to provide them relief. Then there's patience. Patience is to hold back negative emotions, tolerate, wait, and not give up. And why does this principle require the practice of patience? Patience enables us to hold back our perceptions and conclusions about our neighbors until we have enough genuine knowledge. Also, integrity. Integrity is another quality of love. It means to be the same person no matter whom we are with or where we are. It means to be transparent, sincere, and honest. Why does this principle require integrity? To be careful to allow light to fill us, unmixed with darkness of deception, enables us to be consistent in our behavior towards our neighbors. That's what we need, consistency that comes from integrity. Humility is also another requirement. It's to lower ourselves, for example, by admitting our mistakes and serving the needs of others first, and even recognizing like a child one's smallness and weakness and dependence on others. Why does this principle require humility? Viewing our neighbors through the lens of humility avoids the darkness of arrogance, superiority, and envy. Then there's goodness. Goodness is to live a beneficial life that brings benefit to others. It's a quality of love. Why does this principle require goodness? Through the lens of goodness, we perceive what is beneficial to our neighbors and take pleasure in doing good for them. Looking for the good to practice avoids the darkness of negativity, destructive criticism, and paying back evil for evil. So now, it's our turn to create practice. Just as Jesus told the expert in the law when he told him the parable of the Good Samaritan, go and do the same. What can we do to follow this teaching of Jesus? Here's some questions to make you think. In what aspects of your life do you need to be more careful to allow only true light to enter your eyes? Examine some of your perceptions of your neighbors. Are these views of your neighbors accurate and based on assumptions without real knowledge? And how will you practice viewing your neighbors with more gentleness, through the lens of compassion, as well as humility and goodness? So now, as you focus on allowing the teachings of Jesus to provide you light, to make decisions about how to live and how to treat your neighbor, may God bless you.